welcome to the League of Logic podcast, a podcast where you can learn how to think for yourself. If you want to learn more about who we are and what we are doing, check out our website, leagueoflogic.com. Inside the website, you will find study tools in our study library that will help you understand some of the topics we cover in these conversations. All of our previous episodes can be found on the website. We have a contact page where you can leave us a comment or a question. Please do. We'd love to hear from you. And we have a store where you can get some apparel with our logo, and that would help support what we're doing as well. We also have an app that is available on the App Store and on the Google Play Store. Please leave us a rating review on whatever podcast platform you're using, or comment if you're watching the video, and share. It would go a long way in helping us get the word out. Also, whether you're listening to the podcast or watching the video, subscribe. That's a big one. Please subscribe, follow, hit whatever button you got to push on whatever platform you're on. That would be big in helping with the algorithms that get the word out. Thank you for listening to the League of Logic podcast. Now get ready for a much needed conversation about truth.
Woo! That was like perfect timing,
Yeah,
man.
that was perfect timing. I was like, oh man, he's gonna cut it close.
I know, that's what I was watching.
I was like, oh
Yeah, I got a countdown timer. I was like, 5, 4. It's right at the same time.
Took me how many episodes to get that right?
Yeah, 21. But hey, who's counting?
that was like equivalent to the old DVD thing where the words like bounce around and it hits like directly in the corner.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah,
He did a direct shot. Screensaver. I remember that. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh man.
You just got to follow in our last video, The Great Reset. This guy puts on there, it's not working. Welcome to the Great Unplugged.
Yeah. Right on.
I like it.
So, oh no, you got your
David
breakfast.
made me laugh right as soon as I'd taken a drink of my breakfast smoothie. I got breakfast smoothie all over
Did
me.
it come out your nose?
No, it just came out of the bottom of my lip. My nose still ain't operational, man.
It's good to have you back, though. At least you made it.
It's good to be back. You guys really need me back because I watched one of the podcasts and I was like, man, that was a lot of facts. And facts are good, but
They're boring, huh?
they're boring.
Got a little breakfast left in your
Oh,
beard.
I still do.
Yeah. You feel it now, don't you?
As a,
Got it.
I don't think I did. I think
You smushed it down to your chin. That's what happens when your breakfast is thick.
yeah, well, it was good until David made me laugh.
So what'd you think about our podcast if you listened to while we were gone?
Man, that was some interesting stuff. Because just whenever you listen to people, you're like, one thing that still blows my mind is that lady that said we need to get away from the idea that children are an individual's offspring. We need to think about them as a community. They belong to the community, not to the two
Not to the
parents.
family.
Like, that is like, I don't understand it. Like, I can hear one of the things in college that I loved was psychology and philosophy. What people are going to think before they think it and why they're going to think it. And that lady doesn't match. She doesn't match the regular stuff. And so I thought to myself, why would she say that? I mean, surely she's not that stupid and somehow got on TV. I don't believe that. Like, I definitely think that she's not the brightest, but I don't think she's stupid. I don't think it happened for no reason. But I'll talk more about it later.
You would be correct in that. The other thing about that is disturbing is that was not a new commercial.
This happened before?
That commercial was several years old.
Oh, man.
This is not a new thing that's happening.
Yep. Out of my research this week, which that's how I broke the mold this week, guys. I did like a little bit of research.
Boy.
Yep. Not a whole lot, but a little bit.
Were you that bored, or did the Rona just change your whole brain chemistry?
Well, I kind of got sucked into it a lot because I was really bored. And so whenever I was laying on my bed doing absolutely nothing, I subscribed on YouTube to a social justice warriors compilation of women and men being absolutely stupid.
Sweet. Hey, man, that's opposition research. That's good stuff.
It was great. And like listening to one guy, he walked up to another guy, he's like, "What is a woman?" He's like, a woman is someone who defines themselves as a woman. I was like, oh my goodness.
What is wrong with you?
The theology coming out of this man. Woo! But anyways, so I got sucked a lot into it from subscribing to that and just getting different opinions about what other people think.
Just a note on that. That is actually genius, though, because one of the most important things to know if you're getting ready to go into a battle, a spiritual battle, in the physical, whatever you're talking, you have to know who the opposition is and what the battlefield looks like. If our guys get ready to go to war, do you think they just jump off a plane into a spot where they hadn't studied the terrain?
Mm-mm.
No. You got to know what the other people are thinking. So that's genius, man. I'm
Thank you.
Bravo,
Thank you.
bravo.
Thank you. So I did that. And then whenever I got back to work, my coworker, Chad, he was listening to podcasts, and his podcast is about the military and just stuff like that. And it is 5.5 hours long. So it took us all day to listen to one podcast. But there was some guys about the something that happened in Afghan. It was something like Town Square Massacre or something like that. I forget what it was. But man, the government was after him, and it was horrible. It was horrible. I was like, there's so much corruption in the justice system because Hillary Clinton said, how do we get this rolling? And Joe Biden's like, yeah, we're going to do it. And now these guys have to serve time for serving their country. Absolutely ridiculous. Okay, this is a pretty well-built table. Probably won't be flipped today. But anyway, so we listened to that podcast, and then we listened to another one the other day. And this was on Thursday. And this was the eye-opener for me, the thing that opened everything up. Like, Andrew, here's the plan. And it blew my mind. But it was, I don't even think it was a podcast. I think it was like a commercial by Glenn Beck for his new book. I assume it's new. New book, The Great Reset and the Rise of Modern Day Fascism. And then it's got like a picture of Biden on it or something like that and his name in it.
Soros.
Yeah. And so we watched, or we listened to that, and he kind of went into the book talking about, communism, fascism, capitalism, the WEC.
WEF.
WEF. Oh my goodness. Just listening to that man talk about what's going on. That's some scary crap.
I have a question.
Okay.
How come you didn't believe us when we said it?
I don't think it's necessarily, I don't think it's a belief thing. I think it's an understanding thing.
Oh, I get it.
Because every time, and that was one thing that was interesting to me, was every time we talk about it here, I understood your guys' point, and I agreed with it, but it didn't click.
Mm-hmm.
It was almost like instead of drinking the whole bottle, you take a sip.
Just get a taste.
Yeah, you take a sip. And every day, the more you think about it, you get another taste, another sip, and then you hit the last sip, and you're like, holy crap.
Yeah.
That bottle was some truth. I just drank a big truth smoothie, son. So it's not that I didn't believe you guys. It was just,
that's kind of
That
how
was a good analogy.
Yeah, that's kind of how college for engineering worked for me. I was on the 8-year plan, but most people do it in 4. So if we do,
yeah.
And so the first several years, we're learning all this different junk. I mean, and it was complicated stuff. And I'm like, man, this is all complicated junk.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then the last year, they're like, okay, you remember when you learned this? We're going to put it here. You remember this? We're going to put it. And they took all these random things that we had learned and they put them all in order. And this is what you do. And I was like, dude, that's how the world works. This is amazing. Yep.
So anyways, that was the research that I did this week.
That's
Or
awesome,
these
man.
past few weeks.
So are you enlightened now?
I'm scared, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not.
I am scared. Living in reality is great, but then you see two things. You see the situation that you're in,
The
and
real one.
how bad it is.
Yeah.
And then you also see how many other people don't see it.
Yep.
And then you're like, oh man, that makes my situation even worse.
Because they don't listen, do they?
Well, some people do, some people don't.
Yeah.
Majority don't.
even the ones that are listening, a lot of times they're having a hard time getting it. I guess they hadn't had the last drink of the
Yep,
smoothie
they're
yet.
still taking a little sip of the smoothie.
They don't realize they're getting it though.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
That's like you. You didn't realize you were getting it till you had it all, and it was like poof.
Yep. But in my mind before I got it, you know, I was still getting it because I was
Mhm.
still taking a small sip of the smoothie.
Yep.
So
Well, that's what we're here for.
I wonder how many folks are out there listening to this and saying, "I don't get what I'm not getting."
Yeah. I don't understand what I'm missing.
well, that's the thing. It wasn't for me. It wasn't like I'm missing something.
Uh-huh.
Like I thought I had it.
Right.
I was like, oh yeah, I got it. Jesus good, government bad, big tool for Satan. You know, live your best life.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, and that is part of it. That does make sense.
Yep. And in my mind, I was just like, I got it.
But now
But now I don't got it.
it's hard.
But anyways, did a lot of research, and I don't know when we gonna start. But
I
there's
think we already have. I think
there's
we've been going now for like about 5 minutes or so.
there's some interesting stuff in this chicken scratch right here
Hmm.
that was apparently messed up by water at some point.
Might have been your smoothie.
Yeah, well,
Oh, I see the ripples.
yep.
Hey, well, just spill it, man. Let us see what you got.
Yeah,
All right.
we'll hand this whole thing.
I'll just
over
be
to you.
honest with you because I was so excited that you got it this week, and you said you were going to prepare. I did not.
Okay.
Me
Sweet.
either.
It's all
I was
right.
just ready to
This
listen.
is
It's
your
all right.
show today,
Brian
brother.
prepared.
A little bit.
Brian's got a tad bit. Yes,
Brian's got a little bit. That's
I'm
good.
gonna sit over here and enjoy my coffee and just interject things that from time to time to distract you. Okay.
All right.
Let the young guys hold it today.
Yeah, go for it.
So one thing I've been thinking about on the last few podcasts with watching them from home, and just also with the projection of the way that the podcast is going, is we're talking about spiritual warfare now. We're in our third part, but I feel like people don't get what spiritual warfare is. Like whenever I say spiritual warfare, Brian, what's the first thing that pops into your mind?
The
Not even a definition, just like first thing.
thumbnail on the video we posted the other day.
Bam.
Yeah.
Bam.
Yeah, picture.
Yep.
Right there. And it's like the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of spiritual warfare, I think of spiritual Navy SEALs or Green Berets, like pastors, and they get a call 2:00 at night, and they're
We got
like,
3 demons trying
they're
to
like-
break into church.
"It's going down. It's going down at Betty Jean's house." And the pastor says, "Okay, I'm on my way." And he walks in.
Like The Exorcist.
Yep. He walks in, and man, the cabinets are, because a lot of our thoughts are molded by Hollywood.
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah.
crazy how much is molded. But the pastor walks in, the cabinet doors are shifting, books are flying off the shelf, the lights are flickering. And then all of a sudden, the pastor says,
Power
okay.
of Christ compel you.
Yep. He opens up his Bible, says a Bible verse, and boom, blue energy emanates from his Bible, reaches into the person and grabs something and says, "You will pay your tithe." And the person's like, "No, I will not pay my tithe." And then boom, the blue energy rips out the spiritual person or the demon or whatever, and it's over. It's done. Send him back to hell. The ground opens up. The demon goes back to hell, closes back. See you at church on Sunday.
You found that description in the Book of Hesitations, didn't you?
I did.
I'm going to tell you something though. I would almost prefer it to be that dramatic.
I wish, man.
You know why? Because it would be
be-
so obvious you couldn't deny it.
It'd be easy.
It would be more clear.
I'm afraid that's not how Satan
I,
works.
you
I'm
to
sitting
think
here
about.
thinking though, y'all are saying this stuff, and it's almost like that's how we think about it. And most people do. You're outside
Mhm.
and you're watching this thing.
Uh-huh.
But once you finally get it, now all of a sudden you're in it and you're looking at the world and saying, wait a second.
Yeah.
This is completely different. I'm in the thing.
You're
I'm
involved.
in the movie and I'm watching everybody
Mhm.
else.
Mhm.
You're involved whether you
watching
want to
me?
be or not, man.
Yep.
Don't be fooled. You're in it. It's just a matter of whose side you're on.
You ever been sitting around, like, suppose you want to get in really good shape. You wanna. This is the year to get fit.
Yeah.
Start hitting the weights or the gym, calisthenics, whatever it is you do, and you start watching these videos on YouTube, and you're watching these motivational videos about these other guys getting out there and doing, lifting the weights, getting buff. You're like, yeah, I'm gonna do that. Getting all pumped up, but you're still sitting there watching videos.
Yep.
It's like you're just getting into this high of information and getting pumped up about it, but you're not in the mode to do it. You have to get away from the screen. You have to get out of that mindset. You have to get in it, and it's totally different when you get in it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. So I was thinking about, how do we explain spiritual warfare to way people understand it?
So that's a great question. It's actually the question that we ask ourselves before we started this whole spiritual battle conversation. I guess I say we ask ourselves. It's probably just me asking myself or asking David, how do we get through to it? And so just like a lot of things that we do in explanation, we see an end result and we know where we want to go from the beginning to be able to explain where the end result came from.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of that is it's reverse engineering. If I see a building and I want to build it, I know I'm starting with nothing. So I take that building and I break it down backwards, and I go the last step to the first step. So then I'll know what the first step is and I can go forward. And that's kind of what we're actually doing here. We've been going through things that are happening in real life in the physical to show them the complexity of the errors and the wrong that's in it. And so then you got to give them an explanation as why. So we've been backing into the whole spiritual battle thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's a spiritual battle and it's caused by it. And so now the next step is actually really it is to show them why there's a spiritual battle. And then, you can explain to them scripture. So I did write some scriptures and stuff down to explain why. So I'll try to give a little bit better explanation of that then. But you're right. We have to be able to explain to them it is. But if we had started a podcast off with, right now you're either oppressed or possessed by a demon, and that's the reason why you're doing all these things wrong, people be like, man, these folks are crazy, and they just need to cut us right off. So it's a reverse engineer. So yeah, you're right. We got to get there, but so as not to have information overload, because even some Christians, I've got Christian friends. The book that I told you to read, The Battle is the Lord by Tony Evans.
Yeah, I read it.
Yep, it's a great book. I handed it to one of my friends who's a believer. He read about half of it. He gave it back. He said, this is too much for me. I don't want to know it. You see what I mean? And so they have that mindset about it because it is a lot. So and if you just present it to a lot of people, it's so overwhelming, they just reject it automatically. It's the body's response to not understanding. And so if we can give them real life application of things that are happening and slowly, gradually back them back into the reasons why these things are happening, then we can explain spiritual warfare in little bites, little sips, like you've been taking of your drink the whole time. And so finally, when we get all the way back to the beginning, doosh, they all line back up and they get it.
And then everything you look at and you experience, it's like, yeah, spiritual war. That's the way you see everything.
And that's what's been happening to you. You see it, and you do the same thing with a spiritual battle.
Yeah.
But do you got stuff to explain it?
Well, I was going to talk about the event that opened up my eyes.
Okay, I like it.
And then
Personal experiences.
and then see how I see spiritual warfare now.
Okay,
Follow it into the political parties.
I like it.
Spit it out, man. Come on.
Yeah, go for it, bro.
Well, he just gave this whole illustration of not overwhelming people, and my story is kind of overwhelming, I think.
We'll damper it down. Don't
Yeah,
worry
you're
about
good.
it.
Go
They
ahead.
can always skip through if they don't want it.
Okay. All right. So, D-Day in Utah.
Don't name names.
I'm not going to name
Okay.
names. So if you ask me if I love Utah, the answer is yes. Utah was absolutely amazing. I loved every minute I was out there. It was just super awesome. And so I've had a few non-Christian people ask me, I don't know why Christians haven't asked me, but they said, why are you here then? Why aren't you back there? And it all comes down to D-Day. And D-Day was, I'll just jump into the day. So it was one Sunday. We met at nights because the Mormons met in the mornings, and we wanted them to be able to go to theirs and then come to ours. Because obviously, if you have a choice between going to your service or someone else's service, you're going to pick your service. So we have a man who starts coming to the church, and we had two locations, one in Taylorsville and one in Provo. And the Taylorsville one met in the mornings. And so our service rolls around at 5 o'clock, and this man comes, and some of the people from the Taylorsville service come, and we didn't normally see them there. And he begins the service and he tells us about how, like, what happened Sunday morning. And they exclaim how they casted a demon out of a woman, and it jumped to someone else, and they casted it out of her. The thing that confused me was these two women were proclaimed Christians beforehand. I was like, well, that ain't supposed to happen. But he keeps talking. He tells us this awesome story of what happened, and he asks if anybody else at the second service feels like they need to talk about anything, because Provo is a very spiritually dark place. You know, it's definitely the devil's playground. There's a huge lie going, and Satan doesn't have to convince anybody that it's a lie. Everybody already believes it. Mm-hmm. And so I was personally at that time in a very dark place spiritually, doubting God, you know, calling him a liar for not keeping his promises, things like that. So Andrew's not really in a great spot himself. So this man, he asked, anybody have anything that they want to talk about? And my friend, I knew, who was going through some spiritual battles himself, he begins to talk about things that are going on with him. And so they go over to him and they start talking with him, asking him certain questions that I've heard of, you know, like, what's your name? Who are you? What are you doing here? And I know what they're probing for. And they ask him to go to the center of the room, and he says, I can't. I don't think I can go. And I was like, oh, snap. Something's about to go down here at this service. Oh, my goodness. And so they start praying over him and asking him these questions. And then another man who's there starts speaking in tongues. First time I've ever actually experienced speaking in tongues.
Did you understand him?
No, I didn't.
Was there anyone interpreting?
That's one of the things. That was the interesting thing. So this man, before he would speak in tongues, he was like emotionally out of control. He would either be crying or laughing or shaking and shivering, and then he would blurt out something. And the man in charge at that time would say, you know, we need an interpretation. One lady gives an interpretation. We start moving on. Later on, we get another interpretation for that same thing.
So match.
2 interpretations did not match.
Oh, yeah. Mm.
And I was like,
not good.
I was like, that ain't good.
The whole thing ain't good.
So they keep pushing on my friend, trying to get, I don't know, I guess spiritual liberty from him. And all of a sudden, another lady who had just become a new Christian, she starts freaking out, which she's a highly emotional person to start out with, but she just starts losing it, you know, asking the man who's running the show, you know, who are you? Why are you doing this? What gives you the authority to do all this? Blah, 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 blah. So the pastor takes her and he goes to a room and begins to pray with her. But this time I'm like, man, do I have something? Like, because I'm in a very spiritually dark place right now. And so I create my own little space. And the way Andrew creates his own little space, it's kind of not good to create a space like this whenever spiritual, like someone's trying to cast out a demon. So my breathing gets really deep and really rhythmic. And then I start shaking, because whenever I'm uncomfortable, I shake. And then I start rotating my body in a circle to give rhythm to allow me to think for things. So I'm doing this. The guy in charge, he sees me doing this, and that's not good. So
now you're the target.
Yeah, now Andrew's the target. So I'm starting to think of what's going on in my life, and I'm like, you know what? I got to get to the bottom of this. So I pull a guy who I think is qualified, because hey, this man is speaking in tongues. So I ask him, I'm like, hey man, can you come to the kitchen and let's talk? And he's like, sure. So we go to the kitchen, and before all this had happened, the man that was talking about the spiritual war and like casting out demons, and the guy that was speaking in tongues, for some reason they had come before several times, and I did not like their face. I didn't know what it was. It was the first time I'd ever experienced not liking someone's face.
Not their face.
It's not their face.
And I had told them beforehand, like services before, not not the speaking in tongues guy, but the guy who was,
But you didn't like their face?
yeah, because I had no idea what it was. I was like, hey, man, I don't like your face. What's up? Do you know what's going on with this? You know, is it something with me? Is it something with you? You know, try to talk through your
Break
issues.
the ice. You know, I've tried that before. You know, I don't like your face.
Yeah, it's well, in the grand scheme of
What's
things,
up with your face?
in the grand scheme of things, that ended up coming back and biting me. I don't know how.
Oh, I can't imagine.
Yeah, yeah.
Imagine, yeah.
But anyways, so I pull this guy who speaks in tongues aside, and I say, "Hey, man, I don't know what's going on like in this house tonight, but I've got my own personal issues, and I don't know why, but I don't like your face. Why do you think that is?" And we start talking, and like he all of a sudden gets really quiet, and he says, "I'm gonna go talk to the head guy right now. I'll be right back." I was like, "Okay, whatever."
Yeah, go get your boys.
Yeah, I was like, "Go ahead." And he goes and he gets the main guy, and they come over and they say, "Andrew, will you come to the center of the room?" And I was like, "Okay, I guess it's my turn." So two things that I found out later was what that guy heard me say was, "I want to take this candle and burn you up," which I never said, obviously, but that's what he exclaimed to the head man in charge that I said. And so as I'm going to,
It's like the father of lies was telling him what to say.
it's crazy, man.
And you saw him.
This was like the craziest experience. This was Andrew's. Welcome to the spiritual war, Andrew. This is what's happening.
Spiritual reality.
And so I'm going into this room, and I carry. And so I'm like, okay, I'm about to be sitting in the middle of all these people, and they're going to know I've got a gun on my back. So let me just go ahead and give this to my wife, because I trust my wife. And so I say, "Hey, grab my gun," and she doesn't understand what I say. And I said, "Okay." And so I put my back to her, and I slowly pull up my shirt, and I grab my gun. Church freaks out.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. They freak out. Someone grabs the gun and like just runs to a completely different room. And I'm like, okay, this isn't good. So they sit me down, and they start asking me the same questions they were asking my friend. They were saying, "What's your name?" And I was like, "Andrew Hurt." Like, you know that. And he's like, "Who's your father?" And I was like, okay, he's asking a probing question. "Jesus." And the man looks at me and he says, "No, Andrew, Jesus is the Son. And I know that you know that. Who's your father?" And I was like, "Jason Hurt." I was like, I don't know what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And so he's like asking all these questions, and I'm like, okay, everything that's going on right now is absolutely crazy. I know that it's spiritual war because I'm a Christian and I've been told about it before. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to create my own little space again, and I'm going to go in my space, and I'm going to ride this out. And so I just kind of like bow my head, and I'm sitting there. I'm praying to God. I'm like, "God, deliver me from these people. Get me out of here." And this man, he goes up to the pastor. The pastor's come back in the room from dealing with the lady. And he's like, "Man, I don't think we're getting anywhere with him." And he was like, "Okay." And so then they just say, "All right, everybody, it's 8:00. This has been an eventful night. We're going to go home, and that'll be that." And I was like, "What's happening? Wait a minute." I was like,
Is it still on me?
"Even if it is on me, are you just going to abandon me?" And, oh my goodness. This night was the craziest night I've ever experienced. So sure enough, everybody leaves, and me and my wife, we go home, and we have a little bit of a interesting discussion about what happened. And then proceeding from that point, there was a division in between me and my friend and me and the pastor. And man, we tried like crazy to get that division mended back. We had several meetings, and man, we tried, but it ultimately didn't pan out. And so
You realize what actually happened there? You know what the goal of that was?
I know what the goal was.
What was it?
Well, disunity.
It was to make you leave because you had the real deal, and the real deal in a space where the spiritual battle is being dominated by the evil one. They can't have that.
Mhm.
That's why you were targeted. And it worked. I mean, and it's not your fault that it worked. What happened is the leaders of that church are not the real deal. And they have a form of godliness, but they deny the power thereof. And so they have someone who shows up who actually sees the truth of things. You saw the truth. The man spoke with tongues with 2 interpretations that didn't match. You heard the guy say that Christians were possessed by demons, and you know that can't happen. And they realize, okay, this guy right here has more truth in him than we can deal with. We can't brainwash him anymore. He's too grounded. We got to get rid of him.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what I was thinking at that time. But
And the sad part is all them people, they're inviting those things there. It's not those people are bringing them, they're inviting
They're
them.
inviting them. Yep. Whenever you give a demon or something credit for the power that they have, and I'm not saying that they're weak because they're not weak, but when you give them credit as a believer for power, you just increase that amount of power.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Christ came and died on the cross, what he did is he took every bit of that authority away from them. And when we live in him, they cannot mess with us. Now, we don't realize that because we don't tap into the power that we have through the Son. You know, God the Father, through the Son, through us. We don't have to be oppressed. We don't have to be possessed. We can't be possessed if the Holy Spirit is indwelling in us. That power over us is gone.
Mm-hmm.
They have none other than what we give them. And I should have wrote that passage down, but I didn't write it. But we give away strongholds to the devil. He doesn't take them from us. We give them to him. And that's what they're doing. You're grounded enough. You stay firm, you can be in the battle and not worrying about a devil influencing your thoughts or your brain or telling you what to do. And it can't happen. It's impossible because Christ is way stronger than any of them, all of them combined even. And that's the power that we're tapped into.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you got to be careful when you start to give credit to them for things they're doing. I don't want to be oblivious to it. They do have strength, but it is limited compared to what we have in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Very limited.
Absolutely. So we left and now we're back here, but it's like your spiritual eyes, they're open. Scales are gone and you see now. And it is crazy just like because I don't believe that people are particularly interested in myself. You know, I think every thought that we have is sent to us. You know, I kind of think that. I think if you have a negative thought, obviously that was sent to you by something bad. If you have a good thought, you know, like witness to that person, that was sent to you by something good. You know, the emotions that you feel, like that's something. Like you're not a God, so you can't really originate any of your own kind of stuff. You don't create stuff. But just like going in my everyday life now, like you can feel, it's like a feeling, like you know the spiritual is around you. And I try to read a lot of spiritual warfare books because I know this is real. This really happens. This is the war that we're in. But man, I talk to Christians all the time and they're like, oh, you've had an encounter with a demon? What was that like? And I don't know if that's just like them being interested in something they've never experienced or not, but they have no idea what it is. Like whenever I watch pornography at my house, I always have a blanket with me because the room gets cold.
Yeah.
You know, I know, and I know what it is.
It's a spiritual, yeah.
And it's like people aren't aware of that. And another illustration that I thought of the other day, you know, God made one flesh between me and Michaela. And then all of a sudden, me and Michaela, we start fighting about something that may be absolutely stupid. That's a spirit of disunity that's trying to break up what God's already put together. And people just don't get it.
Yep.
Like that's spiritual warfare impacting your everyday life. And you know, well, you're like, well, what do I do about it? Man, you pray. You become the spiritual warrior that you're supposed to be, and you let, and this is how I do it. You let Satan know, hey, you cannot have my wife. You cannot have my marriage. You cannot have my financial life. You cannot have my kids, even though I don't have them yet. You have got to go because we are plugged into Christ. and Christ is infinitely more powerful than Satan. And sorry, Satan, but you cannot be here. You've got to go.
Mhm.
Now, if you're going to command that type of authority, you got to be plugged in.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Like you definitely can't be going to church on Sundays and be like, "Oh, I'm ready to rock and roll, man." Nah, you're going to end up like the 7 sons and get your tail whooped.
Mhm.
And it's going to be bad. But man, I'm eat up with that responsibility now just because I know I'm like, man, I've got to protect my wife. Like I've got to protect my life because it's not the government that wants that. The government's a distraction. And that's what I say whenever I say everything's a distraction. Like if you spend all your time, let's say at work, you know, that's a distraction to me because it gets you away from your family. It gets you away from teaching your family biblical truth. It gets you away from spending time with God. You know, that's the distraction. And it's just immense responsibility to be in such a committed relationship with God that you can actually do something when you know that your house is being attacked. And it's not being attacked by your neighbor or by someone else. It's being attacked by spiritual forces that want your kids, that want your wife. And I'm not talking about, oh, they're going to make them feel bad for a day. I'm talking about your kid's going to go off the deep end and be completely rebellious and be surrounded by their new buddies, which would be spiritual forces. Anyways, all that I feel like I'm starting to rant now, but it's like people don't understand when we say spiritual warfare, this is an everyday thing. You know,
It involves everything.
everything. It's not the pastor going to some lady's house casting out a demon. Like, even though that does happen sometimes, that's not the meat of it. That's
they,
not.
They think it's separate and away from them. That stuff happens over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If
They're
you're
not-
if
they
you're a
don't think-
Christian, it's a part of you, man. It's happening.
It doesn't matter if you're a Christian or not. It's a part of you and it's happening.
Oh yeah, that's true.
everybody's
It doesn't
involved.
matter. You're in it whether you want to be or not. It impacts everybody. In fact, until we get a grasp on what Satan is to all of us, each one of us as an individual, he is an enemy. Those that are in denial about that is not an excuse. It just makes you on his side.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever you fail to believe it, or watch out for Sunday service this morning, by the way. Whenever you don't believe it, and you say that's not real, you've picked a side. Whether you want,
Yep.
you cannot
Mhm.
remain neutral. It is impossible. And so you're right. Our war is not against the politicians. It's not against the race or culture. It's not against pornography. It's not against any of those things, even though they are very, very terrible. Unless we realize the source of the evil that promotes them and pushes them, we don't see the battle. We missed it. Our enemy is not Joe Biden, as bad as he is. It's not the liberals. It's not the communists. It's not the racists or the Marxists. It's not any of those people. It's the forces that are behind these people or those things. And until you know it, that's what I mentioned up front. If you don't realize the battlefield that you're walking in on, you're destined to lose the war.
Mm-hmm.
You have to understand the battlefield, and that's the battlefield. The battlefield is in the spiritual, revealing itself to us through the physical. So I don't want to go up there and do harm to Joe Biden,
Mm-hmm.
but it's my responsibility as a Christian to point out that is evil. And that's what I'm going to do. So I understand what you're saying by calling the work and the government distractions, and in a way they are. I wouldn't use the word distractions. What I would use the word is that we don't see it for what it really is.
Yeah.
When you begin, but it's the same thing. I know exactly what you're saying. You said it right. When we see it for what it really is, and we can address it the way it should be addressed, we won't be obsessed over it with the whole obsession of Joe Biden is a moron, and and you just that's all you can think about is how dumb these people are. Instead, you say, okay, there is an agenda going on there being pushed by the forces of evil, and I've got to battle that because I'm on the side of right.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't battle it to the point that you neglect your family.
Yeah.
But you're involved because to not be involved puts you on the wrong side of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So
Go
go ahead. Sorry, man.
ahead.
I'm moving on to the next thing I was going to talk
Well, I
about.
want to make a comparison then to, you mentioned earlier you were listening to a military podcast, and
Mm-hmm.
you talk about this whole situation, and I think of that as a spiritual battle. And you compare that to physical battles in history books and stories, in the podcasts of the soldiers, they talk about battles that stuck out more, the big memorable battles. There's like D-Day and Battle of the Bulge and the Black Hawk Down scenario.
Mm-hmm.
There's these big battles that stick out like that and that are just burned into your mind. But what we as believers don't realize, and that shows up, and you also mentioned earlier that, you know, Christians haven't asked about what happened or
Mm-hmm.
been concerned about what you went through or
Mm-hmm.
what happened or to learn more about how to deal with it. But we're always in the battle, like we've been talking about. There's these big battles that go on, but then there's also these little skirmishes that
Mm-hmm.
you forget about. You don't the story doesn't go on about
Right, constantly.
the battle's years long, but the big battles are what's talked about.
Yeah.
But the battle is years long, and there's little skirmishes all over the place. Every day is another skirmish in the spiritual war,
Mm-hmm.
whether you know it or not. And we're fighting that battle, and the way you do that is like what you said earlier. You focus on Jesus. You try to you dive into His Word. You do what's right and choose the good and forsake the evil. Romans 13:14 says, "But put on the Lord Jesus Christ and make no provision for the flesh to gratify its desires." That's the battle
Mm-hmm.
in a nutshell. And it's so easy to forget.
It is. Man, Satan ain't going to take a sick day. That's for
No.
sure. It's every day.
Ecclesiastes also mentions this in chapter 12 at the end of the book. Solomon is going through, he's talking about, you know, how there's a time for everything. There's nothing new under the sun. All that he went out and tried and learned, it was just all vain. And he says, right at the end of the chapter, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil."
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you something. Do you feel like a lot of things that in the past that you felt like they don't concern you, now they do? Like we got that Joe Rogan thing up there with Spotify and Neil Young. Censorship of Joe Rogan is important to each one of us here because it's about free speech and
Mhm.
free speech. If Satan
Truth.
can attack free speech, he can move into the Word of God and stop us talking about the Lord,
Mm-hmm.
which he's already done it here with YouTube and Facebook. They've censored us.
Mm-hmm.
So now do you see things that before you thought just didn't concern you that now they do?
Oh, yeah,
like
man.
Joe Rogan?
Dude, absolutely. And I'll use this as an illustration. So I got hit with being an adult and Dave Ramsey at the same time. Andrew, somebody walks up and, "Hey, man, can you spare a couple bucks?" I'll be like, "Sorry, man, I've got charity budgeted out for Jesus right now, and I've already hit that for this week. So, like, what am I going to take that from? Foods for my kids?" I mean,
right. Yeah.
and it's like budgeting never was anything to me because I was a kid, man. And like mom and dad would take care of me. And then I even got out into the real world. I was like, why can't I continue just doing the same thing that I normally did?
I don't have enough money.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it's just like, it doesn't work. And you grow up, you advance. And that's one thing that I feel like for some reason our society isn't doing. Like, I feel like you're a baby, then you become a teenager, then you become a teenager, then you're an adult, and now you're an adult and you become like a philosopher, and then you become an old person. But for some reason, we've stopped around like the 20s, like as a society, our thought progression doesn't go any further. Why aren't we thinking about philosophy and religion and like why war happens? Instead, we're watching our phones of a TikTok about the Bubble Guppy theme song.
Yeah.
I mean, what's happening right now? Are we like regressing down the evolution chain again or something like that, becoming monkeys? Even though I don't believe in evolution, but it's concerning, like what you said. Yeah, man. After this Thursday, dude, your mind's opened up, and you're like, oh my goodness, everything is at stake. You know, some people during the election year, they say, you know, I heard it this past year, this could be the most important election year ever in our history.
You're like,
Yeah.
But-
and people I talked to were like, whatever, you're crazy.
but now
But it literally was.
it was. Look what happened.
It was. And I'm not saying that next year won't be too.
This year is right now.
This year
is the most. Yeah.
Man, Satan is after, he's not just after your kids and your family, and you're like, oh yeah, he's only after my family unit. No, he wants to stop you everywhere.
He's after the world.
He doesn't want you to be able to speak about God. He doesn't want you to raise your children. He wants you to raise the government's children, so the government can say, no, you can't teach this 6-year-old that isn't yours about morals and Christianity.
All right, I'm glad you said it. All right, so check this out.
Well, that's further. I was going to say it was further down, but
So you know that back in the day, you remember they used to have the lines, you know, the British wars, that all these soldiers would just stand in a line in front of each other. I mean, you're just
Yeah,
face
yeah,
to
yeah.
face, and you're like, here I am, we're all going to shoot. And you're like, people are dying. I wonder why. Why are we dying? You're standing in the open, you moron. And so then whenever we got to America, one of the things that we learned from the Native Americans was they hid. Right, they were behind the corner. They had secured themselves. And they arrow right in your face. Like, where'd that come from? You know, and you're dead. You know, and so that's how Satan works. I know that sounds crazy, but it is subtle, man. It is sneaky,
Oh,
sneaky,
man.
buddy.
It
If he
is.
were to stand up right now and through Joe Biden say, "I am Satan, and my goal is one world order and the Antichrist, and I'm working my way to that. If you would please just vote for all the liberals that are against any conservative or biblical matters, we could speed this process up, and we would greatly appreciate it." He ain't going to do that.
Mm-mm.
People are like, oh, it really is him.
Oh my goodness.
So, but here's one article. I know I said I wasn't going to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway.
There you
One
go.
article that I got that Ken Ham put out this morning, and it's what it says is new Canadian law outlaws so-called conversion therapy and sexual morality based on God's word, and it sets up the persecution for Christians in the future. And this happening in more than one country, by the way, but this is just from Canada, where they're trying to tell you that you're not allowed to teach your children sexual morality because it goes against gender identity stuff. And so if they can pass that law and say you can't do that inside of a school or any other public official, what stops them then to say, oh, when your preacher stood up and said there was only boys and girls and that's the only two genders, now you have broken the law.
Mhm.
And it's these little teeny things that happen on the side that seem not to be affecting the church. And this is what drives me nuts.
And it's a direct bomb.
Yeah,
on a
this is
church.
what drives me nuts about a church. There's a lot of churches, man, sit around and be quiet when it comes to political things that are happening like this and these policies that are being passed because they're claiming that we don't get involved with politics. You better,
Mhm.
because it's a battle that they're going to backdoor us, man. It is going to be, you're going to be walking around as a church and Satan's going to jump out from behind a tree and you're going to have an arrow right in the face because you weren't paying attention to what was happening all around you in the name of I'm a Christian and I got to be quiet because I don't get involved in politics.
Mhm.
You see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
So I've been thinking a lot because I had the Rona and nobody would let me leave my house. So I thought about, well, Andrew, what did you think about? I'm glad you asked. I thought about that lady who said that stupid thing, you know, that kids need to be a community thing instead of an individual. And I didn't know why. And I also thought about, you know, with the government shooting down these mandates of vaccines, why were organizations still pushing that? You know, like, why would you force your employees to do that if you weren't getting any heat from the government?
Mhm.
You know, it didn't make any sense to me. And thinking about something is really important.
You think?
Yeah.
See what I did there?
I do think. I do think. And I didn't know when I was going to say this, but I'll say it now. So there's this age with little kids. It's a psychological phase that I think is absolutely amazing. It's the age whenever you can be playing tag and you're running around and the kid's about to tag you and you say, wait a minute, and they stop. And you say, man, I am super thirsty. Can you go get me a water? And they say, yeah, I'll go get you a water. And they go and they get you a water and then they come back, but you're gone. You're hidden. You know, you're hiding from them. And they're like, oh man, nuts. He tricked me. Well, that age eventually stops, or at least that's what psychologists say, to where, you know, we grow up and then one day kid's running to chase you and he's going to tag you and you say, stop. And he tags you anyways. You know, they advance on past that. I don't think we do. I don't think we advance past that. I think we just become more stubborn. Because as I've been thinking and watching all these social justice warrior things, social justice warriors and feminists and stuff like that, they get destroyed by logic, by thinking.
Yes, they do.
But they never turn away from it. They don't abandon it. They stick with it. And as many times they don't even want to have the conversation.
Just like Scott Sterling.
Just like Scott Sterling. But they stick with it. And I've always wondered why. You've just been proven wrong. Why would you stick with that? Like, that doesn't make any sense. And why would you avoid the conversation? And it's, I think because their age, they're stubborn. You know, they're really stubborn. And so we go further back of when we go back to those kids that change their mind. And that's when they're still in that age of flux, right before they develop their stubbornness. And I think that we are still those little kids. We're just more stubborn. So now you got to find a way to distract that kid constantly. And that's introducing cell phones.
Social media,
cell phones. Nobody thinks anymore.
If you tell a lie enough times, people start to believe it.
If you tell a lie enough times, you will start to believe it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But nobody thinks that social media, psychologists and professors around the world say it's too much information for your brain. Like, it's constantly just new information. It doesn't matter if it's like right or wrong. It's just new information. And you can't think about it. And you don't think about it. You're just that little kid that's trying to reach for truth, but your phone keeps saying, look over here, look at this, look at this, look at this. And you keep doing that.
I wonder if that's why God said to meditate on his word.
That's exactly why he said meditate on your word, because you have to have time to think. So anyways, I have been thinking. Me and Chad, as we were out this week, we listened to one podcast on Thursday, and this was Andrew's eye-opening to the government, like everything, where the spiritual war is politically and all that. And it was about Glenn Beck talking about his new book, The New Deal.
The Great Reset.
Yeah, The Great Reset and the Rise of Modern Fashionism. And I heard a couple acronyms that scared me to death. And it was the WEF, World Economic Forum. For those who don't know what the World Economic Forum is, you can pause it right now. We'll be here waiting for you whenever you find it, and then come back and you'll know what it is.
Just listen to last week's podcast. I gave them websites and I read quotes off of it.
Okay, there you go. Perfect. That's basically a whole bunch of people that have a whole bunch of money that decide what we're going to do with the world.
That's right. The elite.
This is where we're going to move. And I was like, what? The fact that that's even like real is crazy, because, man, I'm not going to look after somebody else's money. I'm selfish. I'm greedy. I want my own money.
Remember Milton Friedman's 4 ways to spend money?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Somebody else spending somebody else's money on somebody else. That's the worst way to spend money.
And they say that it's like, we're going to get away. We're sacrificing greed for this moment. And then we could find the best way for our world to progress. You ain't sacrificing greed. You're a whole bunch of billionaires that are going to try to figure out how to make even more money.
And if it doesn't work, there's no consequence to them because they're still billionaires.
Yep. Perfect. And then another acronym that really shocked me was ESG. Did you guys talk about that in last week's?
Very briefly, but yeah, I mentioned it last week too. Yeah, an environmental social governance score.
So this one I'm not fully in it yet, but like I heard some about it and it scared me.
Yeah, it should.
It's basically a type of investing
Mhm.
that is kind of like your credit score, right?
It's going to replace the credit score pretty much. Yep.
Yeah, it's going to replace your credit score. And so instead of this person didn't pay me back, so they have a bad credit score, it's going to be, oh, does this person stand for racism, or does this person
Is he burning too many fossil fuels?
is he
it
burning
green?
too many fossil fuels and all that stuff? And based off of your views, which is your environment, social, and governments, you know, what's your impact on the environment, what's your social status, and the governments is like what you're doing in the community.
Are you hiring transgender? Or are you hiring people based on their capability?
Exactly. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And we're going to invest money into companies that have high ESG scores rather than the old way, which the old way is still corrupt. I mean, we live in a corrupt world, but it's the best option that we got.
So yeah, it's the difference between shareholder capitalism and stakeholder capitalism, which we don't have enough time now. We're getting close to the end, but we will talk about that later. Shareholder capitalism and stakeholder, because that ESG score is a big deal of what's actually happening on the backside of this great reset.
Yeah. So stakeholder, like just
Stakeholder is the one they said, this guy's got a good ESG score. We're going to invest in him. But then on top of that, because we have invested in him, we will be able to govern his business based on his ESG score, make sure it maintains. We will tell him where he can and where he can't go and work, where he's going to set up business, where he's not. And then if he refuses to do that, your ESG score goes way, way down. They pull their investment. Eventually you go out of business because you can't get hired to do jobs.
mm-hmm.
It goes back to the equity, equality thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's all social justice.
It's crazy.
Yep.
It's crazy what it is. So I'll just say two more things since we're running low on time. Number one is, I don't know if it's more of a thought thing or just Andrew's thing, but I asked Michaela this past week, I said, what's the biggest difference in your grandmother's generation of raising kids and our generation of raising kids? And she said technology.
Yep.
And I said, yeah, 100%.
That's a good answer.
Everybody that I talk to, even like Christians and non-Christians, they give their kids iPads. You know, like here's a 2-year-old walking around with an iPad watching Bubble Guppies. And I find that extremely dangerous. Because, yeah, some parents will say, we don't have enough time, or you don't understand the stress of taking care of a child. You know, everybody else before my grandparents, they were just super ninjas, and we're not super ninjas. But think about the psychological repercussions of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I have a baby, and instead of this baby coming to me and asking me questions about the world, saying, you know, like, what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong, and there being a relationship built where this kid knows that he can trust me because I'm his father and I'm going to put enough time into him, you know, that's gone. Now it's, this kid goes to an iPad, he goes to technology, he says, you know, what is a popsicle? And he looks up the popsicle, you know, no matter what he's looking up, he's now believes that iPad, that piece of technology, is the source of truth.
Mm-hmm.
And if I contradict it, I have no relationship with that child. You know,
it's a division that is by design for even in the Great Reset to separate the family from the children so that the children are groomable.
What is the family unit the father and child represent?
There's a relationship between the father and the son.
Relationship with the Father and the Son, and also the relationship we have with Jesus. And I think that applies, that situation, what you just talked about, applies to how that kid's going to grow up and be able to have a relationship with Jesus. How are they going to be able to understand that as well if they don't have it exemplified growing up?
Yeah.
I'm going to give you the 5-minute spiel right quick on why, biblically.
Okay, give it to me.
All right. First thing I want to say, God did not create Satan. He created a beautiful angel that was perfect in every way. And just like the rest of us, he gave him the ability to make choices, free will. It was Lucifer. He was magnificent. He was perfect. There was nothing wrong with him, but God understands the importance of being able to make your own decisions, and so he gave it to them. The difference between him and us was Satan, before he was fallen, had every bit of the knowledge of what good meant and what evil meant because he was there with God all the time. Okay? And we read about that in Ezekiel 28 whenever they're talking about the king of Tyre. And so it's written at first glance, when you read it, you think that God is speaking to this king of Tyre who's on the earth, but in actuality, God is speaking through the king of Tyre to Satan. And sometimes God does that. We see it a lot often in his word. For instance, when Peter told Jesus, you're not going to go to the cross, and Jesus turns around and says, get behind thee, Satan, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's not talking directly at Peter, but he's talking through Peter to Satan, who made Peter say those things.
Mm-hmm.
You see it again whenever you're talking about when God is talking to the serpent and he says, on thy belly, we're going to bruise your head. He's not actually talking to the serpent part of it. He's talking through the serpent to Satan, who is in the serpent. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so at first glance, you think he's talking to the king of Tyre, but in actuality, God is writing to Lucifer, to Satan, the God that he created. And in Ezekiel 28:14, he tells us that Satan was on the holy mountain. And this holy mountain represents God's government.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, get ready for this because this is the real deal. He is in God's government. He is in the highest position of the government. He is atop the holy mountain. Satan was. That's where God put him. He was to oversee everything. The only person higher than Satan in this government was God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how God created him. And it was Satan's job to handle the merchandise, is the word that's used. And this merchandise is the praise from the angels and the people that comes through Satan, believe it or not, to God. He was handling all that. And because he was handling it, he said, I'm up here at the top, but I'm not getting any of this. I like it. And pride, which what gets every one of us. This is why the people you're talking about that are wrong, but they refuse to change their stance, is pride. It's just like Satan. It is the ultimate cause of our fall. Pride. In fact, think about it. When Satan was in the garden, he tempted Eve. What did he tell him will be the consequence of eating that fruit? You could be more like God.
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that what we say as Christians? Lord, make me more like Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be right. But if you turn it into a prideful thing, I want to be more like God, not let me live better.
Mm-hmm.
It's pride. And that's what caused his fall. He wanted this praise. Soon as that pride took over and he realized he wanted something, maybe he took some of that merchandise, stuck it in his pocket. I don't know what it looked like, but something happened. God smacked him down to the ground. I mean, it was immediate. Like, you're down. And these people that you had convinced, these angels you had convinced this was okay, they're going with you. Now what we end up with is an evil Satan because he has chosen evil. He chose it. It's not the way God intended it. Just like God didn't make the garden bad, he made the garden perfect. We chose to corrupt it. When we corrupted it, we handed over the deed to this world. Satan is in charge of the world right now in the physical.
Mm-hmm.
You see that in all throughout Scripture too. You have scriptures like 2 Corinthians 11-14, and no marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. Therefore, it is no great thing if his ministers, that's all the ones that come. Funny, they use the word ministers too, right? What do you call that guy in charge over there in England? Prime Minister.
Mm-hmm.
Also transferred into ministers of righteousness, whose end shall be according to their work. There's a kingdom that is ruling over the world right now, and it is totally evil, okay? It is a kingdom that is headed up by the rulers of evil. What does Ephesians say? We don't fight against flesh and blood. Principalities and rulers of the darkness. This is Satan's government. He's still in charge of it. He's still sitting on top of this evil mountain now, not a holy one. He still has a chain of command underneath him, which is his war. This is why it's important. Jesus called Satan the prince of the world. Paul calls him the God, the little g of this world. Ephesians, rulers of darkness. There's tons and tons of scriptures to reference this. If you want to know what's wrong with the world, just look at things like Acts 10:38. It speaks of those that are oppressed by the devil. It's how God anointed Jesus of Nazareth with the Holy Ghost and with power, who went about doing good and healing all that were oppressed. That were oppressed of the devil. Oppressed of the devil. That's what Jesus came. There are people here that are oppressed. That is not possessed. That is, there is a demon that's following you around and it is influencing you, but it may not be inside you totally controlling you, but it is it's a heavy influence.
You're
It's the
holding
thing,
hands with it.
holding hands. It's the thing that causes depression. It's the thing that causes over anger. I mean, these are the things that happen. 2 Corinthians 12:7 talks about the messengers of Satan. And lest I should be exalted above measures through the abundance of the revelation, there was given to me a thorn in my flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me. All right, these are messengers of Satan. These demons, they're all around us everywhere. There is a government and it's ruling the world. You want to know why there's such a battle on the children?
Mm-hmm.
Open the Bible.
Foundation.
Open the Bible. Leviticus 18:21 and then 20, it talks about the god of Moloch. Remember Moloch? The fire in his belly and his arms reached out.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that the people satisfied this god is they took their little babies and they burned them at the sacrifice for this god. They burned their little babies. Baal, the god of fertility, the sex god. How did they satisfy that god? They sacrificed their babies to it, right? Satan has always hated the children. He realizes that's where it begins. And so you got Pharaoh comes around. What did Pharaoh do? He killed the babies.
Mm-hmm.
What did King Herod do? He killed the babies. What does Planned Parenthood do? It kills the stinking babies.
Mm-hmm.
Abortion is a blood sacrifice to Satan.
Mm-hmm.
There's no other way to say it. And that's why there's such a war on this family. This is why they want to create the division between the grounded family that God set up the way it's supposed to be. They have to take the children away so there's no influence from a moral basis or from a father and a mother combined together that need to work together. It takes that away, and then this child becomes groomable. By who?
Satan.
The government of our world.
Mm-hmm.
Who is that run by? The God of this world, which is Satan and his ministers. That is the spiritual battle,
Mm-hmm.
and it's everywhere in everything we see.
Yep.
Satan didn't create the government, though. He's just overtaken it.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And where's the Antichrist going to show up? That's why
Oh man, the Antichrist is a whole. It's not like a whole nother thing. So I think Christians are at an advantage because we know the future. You say, what? We know the future? Yep. There's prophecies. The prophecies have all coming true. Right now, we're 100 for 100. You know, we've never been wrong. And God said, when the Antichrist is here, the world will be united under one. There'll be one world government, which is what our government is trying to do now.
Mm-hmm.
And so being a Christian, this is the end game, maybe. Now, because God didn't say it's the third time he's going to try it, it's going to work. Or it's the 17th time he tries it, it's going to work. Because it's already been tried once.
Yeah.
In like the 40s. Was it the 40s?
Tried it, yeah. Then they started this time again back in the 70s. Yep, this has been going on since then.
Yep. So this is like what, the third?
It's hard to say exactly what try this is, but, you know, whenever we left, because it was tried before we ever left Europe to come over here in 17, whatever it was, to find a new world. In 1492, when David and I sailed the ocean blue to come over here and discover America, we left that type of one world government that was going to rule us by religion.
Mm-hmm.
That was back then.
Yep.
So there's no telling how many. I can't tell you. I can't count how many. But you're right. This is not the first attempt.
Yep.
This could happen again. We could make a rocket called the Mayflower and
go to Mars.
There you
But
go.
look, it doesn't have to happen this time, and that's not to say that it won't happen eventually, because it will. But that is no excuse for us to sit on our backside and just let it.
Mhm.
Right.
Gotta
'Cause
fight.
I don't want my kids taken away from me.
Exactly.
I don't want the government to say, yeah, Andrew, you don't have a kid. You just have another government citizen. I don't want that. I don't want the government to say, Andrew, you have to, what's an immoral thing? I don't know. Kill James. We'll say kill James. I say, no, I don't want to kill James. They say, all right, we're going to put a squeeze on your money until you kill James, and then we'll let it back out. Like, oh my goodness. This is some scary stuff.
Yeah.
There was you mentioned we got to fight to the end. I was just reminded of, I forget what year Olympics it was. It was maybe 12. It was Shaun White was up for the half pipe. He had already, they each have 3 rounds, and highest points wins. He comes up to his third trip down the slope and he's already won. He's got the gold. He doesn't have to do anything. He could just slide straight through the middle. But yet he went down the slope and gave it all he got and did an even better run than he did before. He knew it was over, but he gave it all he got anyway. I think that's how we should be in the spiritual battle. We know God wins in the end, but we need to give it all we have while we're here on earth.
We're actually commanded to do that. Paul says, I press towards the mark of the high calling. And that's like for us, that's like football term. You ever seen the sleds? The guys pushing the sleds? What's happening in our world now is there are more and more evil things that are stacking on top of those sleds, and they're making them heavier and heavier and heavier. But we don't quit pushing, man. We keep pushing forward. We know where we're going. Eventually, it's all going to come to an end, but I'm not going to stop. That's what last week I was talking about. I'll go down swinging. I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to be quiet. You cannot stop me. He might kill me, but that only makes me stronger because now I'm with him. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a big deal, man.
Craziness.
And we got to quit thinking. People's got to quit saying that Satan knows how it all turns out. He doesn't believe that he's going to lose.
Mm-hmm.
If he knew how it was all going to turn out, he'd never sin to start with.
If he knew how it was going to turn out, he wouldn't be tempting Jesus like, hey, look, you see these worlds? I'll give you this entire world. Do you think Satan could have done that?
His pride's not going to let him. He's in it for the win, man, and he will be till the very end.
Mm-hmm.
So we can't stop fighting. You cannot stop.
Pride will blind you, even blinds Satan.
Satan. Pride, same thing. Pride and Satan. Pride will blind you as a believer, even when you're right.
Mm-hmm.
Because you'll miss the point.
Yep.
And the point is these people that we are talking about all the time, the government and all these folks, they are still individuals. Christ died for them just like he did for us.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not careful, even being on the right side of this, we'll develop a hatred for people that we don't even know. And I don't hate Joe Biden. I hate what's happening through Joe Biden.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hate the people that are in the government. I hate what's happening through them. You see what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You got to be very careful for that. And then the other side of that is this. This is important. I know this at the end. Everybody's bored to death. They're tired of listening. Pay attention. Maybe I should put this at the front. When we're talking to people that don't believe the same way we believe, maybe you've got a very liberal friend that thinks that transgenderism is fine, and we're having these conversations. The goal is not to belittle them to the point that whenever they concede, they feel like they can't join the team.
Mm-hmm.
The point is to show them truth enough, and if they change their mind, you don't stand up and say, I told you so. You say, man, I am so happy that you realize truth. Welcome to the team. You have to do that, because if you're going at it with a piss poor attitude, can you say piss poor attitude?
Yeah, you can say piss poor.
Okay, I didn't know. I know it just pisses against the wall, but if you go at it with a piss poor attitude and you're demeaning these people and you're belittling them in the things that you say, to the point that whenever they finally concede, then you stand on their chest with your sword and you're like, ta-da, and then you chop their head off.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't do it right. It's wrong. Mm-hmm. You need to be welcoming. If Joe Biden woke up out of his demented stupor, whatever he's got going, his dementia, right? He said, hey, I believe Jesus Christ is Lord and all these things are wrong. We should all be like, yes, Joe Biden. I mean, I'm going to vote for you again if you do that.
Mm-hmm.
Is that you're like, what? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
We don't have that because of pride, because we want to be so right that we look at the others and we blame it on the individual. And it is not the individual. It is the evil forces that are behind it that are pushing that individual to do these things.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the war is. That's why we call out the things in the physical so that we can be aware of what's happening in the spiritual, because it's all tied together.
Yep.
What else we got?
I like it.
Man, that's pretty much it.
That was a long one. We're going to do it again, though. Anything else you need to say, Brian?
Come back again next week, and we'll give you some more.
Yeah, come.
Hit the subscribe button, please.
Please, yeah. That's another thing that's important. We have to hit the subscribe. That is changing the algorithms. To watch is great. To subscribe is the way that has to happen. You subscribing people all on purpose? Just take their phone and do it for them.
I actually had one lady who, I don't know how, but our YouTubes got mixed up, and I was like on her YouTube, and I was like,
subscribe.
Legal Logic. You need this truth, lady.
Awesome. All right. Next week.
Thank you for listening to the League of Logic podcast. If anything said or anything we talked about has made you think or made you mad, please check it out for yourself. We want you to look for and know the truth. We want you to understand the truth. Please leave us a comment or a question on our website. We'd love to hear from you. If you haven't already, please leave us a rating and review. It would help us out a lot in promoting what we're doing. And please subscribe. That's a big one. Please subscribe or follow whatever platform you're on. Also, if you would like to patronize our store, that would be very helpful in promoting what we're doing. Check it out. We've got a lot of great apparel to choose from. Thank you again for listening to the League of Logic podcast. We look forward to you tuning in on the next episode.